All right, now let's get into our special coverage that I alluded to at the top of the show. This was requested by somebody on YouTube, and I committed to doing it, and I felt like the main podcast needed to also hear it as well, because there may be people here curious about it. And as a side note, if there's ever any of these kinds of requests, we do take those kinds of requests. We want to hear those. We like to smoke. Just hit us up on the show, cryptotalkradio.net, and fill out the form so we can hear from you. We also have an email address now. I was able to build finally and got everything working there. Email is thesmoke@cryptotalkradio.net, just like it sounds. Thesmoke@cryptotalkradio.net. We love to hear that feedback. We want to improve, like we said. We want to get better. So this request came in over YouTube, and it was very intriguing, and it's something we planned to do for a while, but there's a lot to it, and there's no singular definition, unfortunately, and certainly not one that everybody agrees with. Because of the challenges in trying to put it into something, I didn't want to take that stab until I was really confident, had done this for a while. I think now's the time. The question as asked was, they wanted to have a dedicated episode around rug pulls and how do you identify a rug pull? And I'm not referring to the coverage that we do of tokens, although that's part of it, but rather traits, attributes, things that we can look for. And what constitutes one? How do you know that that's happened? The challenge is that these scammers have gotten very elaborate. And I'm going to be sharing this under my own lens. This is my opinion of what I see. First, let's start with what I have as the boilerplate definition of a rug pull. In the simplest, dumbest, easiest terms, aka explain it like I'm five. A rug pull at the core means that I made some money available to do something, and then I took the money before you could do a thing. If we accept that as the dumb, simple definition of a rug pull, you understand why it's so difficult to really create more definitions from that, or more specific definitions, because when we say take money, there's a lot to that. When we say do something, there's a lot to that. But cryptocurrency is a very challenging business. You can't just create one singular path to a rug pull. But if we accept what I'm saying, my interpretation, you make money available and then you take to do a thing, and then you take the money before you can do a thing. If we accept that as the core definition of something, let's give an analogy now to kind of put some framework around this and how it works. Let's say, imagine that you could create a bank today, and you say, all right, I'm going to create this bank, and I want you to create accounts in the bank. So I want you to deposit your money in the bank, because all banks, they function based on deposits. No bank can function if they don't have enough deposits. When you deposit funds in the bank, the funds are being used to support loans. Loans are basically borrowing your money. That availability of funding that's in the bank is equivalent to what you would have in terms of liquidity. So if you don't have enough people depositing money into the account, and people are just taking out, as in they're withdrawing, or they're taking excessive loans, what ends up happening? You now can't make additional loans, number one. Number two, you can't make people whole. If somebody defaults on the loan, you're not able to pay them back. So now your risk is going up. So what you would have to do as a bank, imagine you're a bank, you have to figure out a way to entice more people to come to your bank. What most banks will do is they'll create these ads, usually mail or email or online, and they'll say, open up an account with us and we'll give you $100. Chase does that all the time. Open up an account with us and we'll give you a car loan pre-approved, or they'll do all these gimmicks. And it's designed to entice you to come to their bank and deposit funds into their bank. And they want you to leave the money there. They don't want you to withdraw. They'll give you incentives for direct deposit. Why? Because direct deposit to them is guaranteed income flow. They want you to use your debit card. Why? Because they can collect fees off the debit card transactions from the merchants. They want you to leave the money in there for as long as possible, and so they'll offer you some garbage APY, right? So interest for the account. Not all do, but the majority do, banks. And they offer savings accounts, and they'll gladly push you to create a savings account, and it has a higher rate. Why? Because the savings account has a limit, and this is United States. I'm pretty sure it's only United States. There's a limit on how many transactions, how many actual withdrawal transactions you can do on a savings account, and then they start charging you fees. There's all these different avenues for them to charge you money. In the old days, used to be you had to pay them to create an account there. That changed a long time ago to where now accounts are essentially free and you can set it up anywhere. They made it harder because what it used to be is that you would basically go online and you would enter some basic information. It would create the account. Because of Patriot Act, predominantly, it's harder to create the account online. So what they did is they created tools to identify who you are and make it harder to create the account compared to what it would be if you walked into a branch. So if you try right now to create an account on Chase, if you've ever had a Chase account at any point, even if it wasn't a personal account, you're going to get blocked if you don't have that password from like, say, 10 years ago. And their forgot password might not work because it could be an old email address and you can't get around it. You can call the highest levels of Chase and they will never get around it because of the way they built their online. But you could walk into a Chase branch if one was close to you, and all you really have to do is sit with one of the desk people, show an ID, show your social security, fill out a basic form, and they'll create the account on the fly. Because a human looked at your docs. That's all it is. The reason I'm breaking that down is you should be seeing parallels in the banking system versus what crypto is being forced into, because this process of forcing you into a branch or doing this nonsense online is the same as KYC, know your customer. The process for receiving funds and encouraging people to deposit is very similar to liquidity. The desire of people to then use the debit card on a regular basis to collect fees is very similar to the volume that's necessary to raise the price of a thing or the value of a thing. This is all represented then to people who are watching it in terms of market cap. So all these things are tied together, right? They're very close to the banking system. This is part of the problem we talked about with Mr. Segala on the episode, is we forced cryptocurrency into essentially a ghetto variation of banking in some form. We've tied it too close to fiat, and as a result, the down points of fiat affect cryptocurrency, and they shouldn't, because that was never the vision under Ryoshi. Now, go back to our imagining of a bank. Let's say that as the bank owner, you said, I'm going to just simply take all that money for myself. What would happen? People can't withdraw because there's no money available. You can deposit, but you can't withdraw. So nobody can, quote, sell. So you can't withdraw funds because somebody just yanked all this money out. That's basically a rug pull. But the problem is that in the way crypto's been built, that is one avenue that they just basically went into the vault and took all the money out. And there are ways that banks are required to prevent that from being able to happen. Like you have multiple people involved that are required to have the vault, and you got security codes, and you got reporting up to the federal government. There's all these layers of protection in the banking system to try to avoid that kind of thing happening. And that's why it's so darn rare. It's a federal crime to go and do that because it's assumed that those funds are still owned by the Federal Reserve. So it's nearly impossible. It's still possible, but you don't hear about that. You don't hear about this kind of person doing that inside the bank that works at the bank. It's unheard of because it's so heavily regulated. But nothing stops this person who works at the bank, their Bonnie that works at the teller, working with Clyde, who doesn't work at the bank, and having Clyde rob the bank or under the auspice of a robbery, take the money. Now, he's not going to be able to take that much money because he's only one man. He can't carry it all. And most banks don't hold all of it on site. They'll put it in like a offsite depository. That's why you see the Brinks trucks. But you still could have this collaboration, an inside job, as it's called, where somebody inside the bank is enabling somebody outside the bank to take the money. Because of that collusion, it's still essentially a rug pull by definition. The analogy of what I just described in the crypto world is you could have somebody who allows their buddy to take a wallet and drain the money that way. So this is what happened recently with a lot of these tokens like the currency one. You spin up all these side wallets, they hold the vast majority of the value. So when the price jumps and they sell off, they're taking the money out. It's not like they're taking it from inside. They're taking it because they were given access to the cash. The analogy there, again, somebody in the teller who has the keys to something enables somebody outside to come in and take that money. Or somebody inside, and this happens a lot in businesses, where they'll take and what they call cook the books. So they'll create a transaction. For example, I spent $10,000 on window washers. But really, the window washer, quote unquote, is that girl's boyfriend. That's what I'm talking about there. So you're draining money because these transactions are not being overseen. This is rare, but it does happen. We do see businesses do that. But that's another form of rug pull because you're still taking the value out of that business and you're giving it to somebody that's not part of the business, or somebody in and out of the business. They're collaborating and colluding to make that work, even though that person outside wouldn't otherwise have rights or access to do it. The reason that that's rare in business, it still happens, but it's rare, is again because of oversight, internal oversight, as well as regulatory scrutiny, especially if it's a publicly traded company. If it's a private company, it's harder to catch unless you had the right people in the right place at the right time. In my business, as an example, I handle the books. Okay, so then, yes, I theoretically could yank from my own company, but it doesn't make any sense because my company pays me. So the money doesn't all go to me because I have to pay employees. As I pay employees, there also has to be income coming in. The income coming in can be $500,000. The income going out, or the salaries, can be $100,000, at least $400,000. However, I still have to pay the business expenses. I still have to pay the taxes. And most importantly, I got to pay to the local governments and report to the local governments how exactly much I'm spending and how much money I made. All of that's part of requirements that are seen by the higher level, in this case, the government entities. That helps prevent some of that, but it still happens. They get creative with it. That's another form of a rug pull in the crypto world, is there's just no requirement for this accounting. There's no requirement to account for these expenses for the equivalent of fiat that was used. So when we get to a world that they're talking about, where we're just going to transact everything in cryptocurrency, right? There would have to be reporting on it. But today, if a business takes cryptocurrency and they convert it to fiat, you can't say that that cryptocurrency did or didn't have value at the point you transacted it. Meaning you could have a business that takes a cryptocurrency in payment. That cryptocurrency rug pulls, which is why most of them stay with Bitcoin, by the way. But let's say that crypto rug pulls. If that crypto rug pulls and this business just took that in and they reported on the books that they just received $500,000 in crypto, and it rug pulls down to $50, that business, if they reported it as a profit, which hopefully they didn't, but if they did, they would now have to report a loss. And there's tax benefits to doing so. But if they bring it in and they convert it to fiat so they actually get that $500,000 before it rug pulls, then it doesn't matter that the crypto rug pulled. So on the business side, they would be safe. So number one, somebody inside who has control of a thing, go back to your bank analogy, who has control of a thing, they take the money from inside and they run and it's theirs and they're off and you can't see them again. Number two is where somebody inside is collaborating or colluding with somebody outside in order to take the money by way of transactions. They are draining it. Either they're creating phony transactions, or they're leaving a vault open accidentally, quote unquote, or they're leaving a drawer open accidentally, quote unquote, or this person gets hired as a janitor and they allow a person into a back room and they're not supposed to, quote unquote. There's all these things where somebody inside is working with somebody outside in order to make that happen. These are forms of rug pulls. In the crypto space, they take the form of either the devs themselves yank the liquidity directly, and or the devs themselves work with somebody outside and they spin up these phony wallets and they give them the bulk of the supply so that they're holding the vast majority of the value. Then they cause a pump, and then they yank it all by selling everything and dumping everything and taking all the money and going. That's another form of it. This may be controversial, but I'm going to add one more form that I would categorize as a rug pull. And others will likely disagree with me, and that's okay. They have the right to disagree with me, but I'm going to call it a rug pull. If you have a token project, and the token project, so let's step away from our bank analogy for a second. If you have a token project, and the token project, when they need to do marketing, and they need to do development, and they need to do advertising, and they need to do all these things to get people to buy into the project, they're spending your money as investors. There's a pool that's been invested in it, whether it came from a pre-sale or it came from the regular sales. The point is, it's your money that they are using to do these transactions. If that token, and yes, I'm targeting Saitama when I say this mostly, but there's a lot of them. If that project is using your money improperly, meaning they're throwing money at projects that have not had a significant positive net benefit to you as an investor, and instead it's draining the pool, I would consider that a rug pull. Why? Because you're knowingly going after things that aren't working. And this could be incompetence. This could be simply they don't understand marketing, or it sounded good, or they waited too long, or they didn't plan it right. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why. The point is, if you're doing it and you keep doing it, like that's the key. If you keep failing and you're spending the investors' money on these failures, I would consider that a rug pull. It's kind of referred to as a slow rug pull. And I don't think it's a malicious rug pull, because not every rug pull is malicious. And I'll get to that in a second. But it takes the form of a rug pull because you are draining the value out of the project. Even though you don't mean to, you're doing it because you're incompetent and you're doing something that is taking people's value. So I'm going to include that. I have no choice but to include that. Another one that'll be controversial, I think, is like with Mr. Car Salesman on Seifu. And I'm going off what I'm told because I didn't see it myself. But if you have projects that you spin up and they fail for whatever reason, could be that there was just the wrong marketing, could be the wrong timing, could be the wrong whatever, it fails. And you take all the money out of the project to spin up another project, that's a rug pull because you took all the money out of the project. When you do it multiple times, at that point, it's at every single project now is at risk of rug pull because you did it once. So if you do it once, everything else is at risk of rug pull because you've shown a tendency to take money from investors. Do you understand? So this goes to intent. There are rug pulls that are not malicious. You jacked up and you're going after shillers or you're going after marketing and you don't know what you're doing. I don't think it's malicious. I think it's incompetent. Different from malicious in intent. You are taking money from people and you're not giving it back to them and you're just making a dash. That's another form of rug pull is showing intent to take people's money from the past. So when you have somebody who spins up a new project, if you research and you find they have a history of having taken people's money, the intent to do so is established. To me, you should automatically assume whatever project they're in now is likely to be a rug pull until they prove to you that it's not, and that's going to take a long time. Don't go off the initial green chart. Don't go off of 2 months worth. You're talking like a year. Give them a year because many of the projects don't last that long. I just looked at Baby Doge Billionaire. It got kicked off CoinMarketCap. I don't know why. I didn't research it deeper, but tokens don't last that long. They might sound good on the surface, but they don't last that long. So my point is, if there's an intent to do harm, right? Think of it as an unspoken Hippocratic oath. There should be no intent to do harm to investors. If they've shown an intent to do harm to investors at any point, we shouldn't give them a pass and say, well, you learned deep. We should say, no, you showed intent to harm investors in the past, and to us, any new project you're involved in or at the front of is essentially a rug pull. The last one I'm going to categorize in this series, because I don't want it to go too long, I will treat this as part 1. I will revisit it again in a part 2 at some point in the future. The last one I'll talk about here, this one's going to be controversial. This one's going to piss people off, but I think it's important because we've seen recent instances of it, and it's a rug pull that is triggered by shillers. And you're trying to understand, how is it possible that a shiller can trigger a rug pull? It's very simple. If the shiller is the one most enriched by the activities where the token crapped, that's a rug pull. It just so happens that it's not the internal devs that did it, but it could be. It could be that the devs have a wallet in the bag and then they cashed out and they were basically colluding with the shiller or shillers and the shiller cashed out. So it could be that both sides cashed out. The point is, in summary, if the shiller is more enriched than any of the individual investors, it's essentially a rug pull because that dev knowingly went after the shiller, knowingly supported what they did, knowingly allowed them to dump. This was my issue with Paratoken because Paratoken started going after shillers after it was successful. The moment it went after shillers, those shillers, and they know who they are, dumped on it. They sold off and the project never recovered. Then we just saw incompetence from the devs. But the point is, that's a rug pull because you took value from the investors. Like we always go back to the simple definition. Was there something that took place where initially value was made available to do a thing and then that value was taken from people to where they can't do the thing? That's what it is. Those are my high level. I'd say that tackles 80% of it. There are tons of other ways to pull from people, tons of other ways. And some of them tie over to honeypots, which is a whole different type of thing. Some of them tie to exit scams, which is a whole different type of thing. Some of them tie to this pre-sale scam, like I covered with Forever Financial. There's all sorts of other variations on the theme. The ones I gave you, to me, that's the big list. If you did nothing else but look for those, I see that's 80% of what's out there. The problem is, as we recently saw with currency, sometimes you don't know in advance unless you start going back to more of the fundamentals. I want a PDF white paper, your website's in good shape and doesn't look like crap. And like with this recent business that I covered this morning or late last night, is your web page a blatant copy? I'm not talking inspired by, I'm talking a blatant copy of somebody else's website. Open stream world, are you withholding claims? Like if you're doing sketchy behavior, this goes to, are the devs doing what they told me or are they not? When you start seeing sketchy behavior, you should put them at the red flag that they may eventually do a rug pull. Doesn't guarantee they will, because sometimes they could just be incompetent, but incompetence itself, as I said, could also precede a rug pull. In summary, if money's made available at a point, however it came available, to do a thing, and then later it's removed to where it's no longer available to do that thing, it's a rug pull, regardless of who took the money. It doesn't matter that's the dev versus a shiller, because those are the most notable culprits when we see rug pulls is going to be shillers who basically drain a project because they dumped a bunch of bags that they were given by these various token projects, or it's the devs themselves, whether that's because of a rogue dev or it's because the devs just quit and give up because they can't make this project work because they suck at marketing, for example. Or it's just the blatant ones, like they spin up a telescam and they tell everybody to go to telescam and they pitch it to the moon that it's going to go 10x, and then they immediately dump it days later, like with this currency business. So there's all sorts of variations. I can't tell you what to immediately look for. I can only tell you that all we can assume and try to standardize on in terms of our requirements is every token that wants to be treated credible, we should hold the standard that they should be just like the stock market in how they behave. You should have a PDF white paper just like you would have a stock prospectus, because that's what we would expect. A document that tells us what they're doing, how they're doing it, what we can expect, what's our expected return, who, the what, where, when, how, and why of the project. They should have a very well-built website that looks pretty much unique compared to everybody else. There may be a template, that's fine, but your information should be unique. Your utility and your use case should be unique and special and something that stands out in the crowd, not a copy of something else like Baby Doge versus Baby Doge Billionaire versus Baby Cat versus Dogezilla versus Doge. Like you're doing something that stands out in a crowd. You're doing something because you believe you have something that is unique to you that solves, and this is my last point, real world problems outside the crypto bubble, which means you shouldn't be stuck in telescam. You should be actively using all forms of social media because you want the smoke. When you do your AMAs, you should be welcoming platforms like myself who are going to hit you with hard questions because you know that you're legit and you're serious and you're here and you want to prove to people that you're on the up and up. That's what you should want. That's how we help avoid rug pulls. It still doesn't get rid of them because you could have the best project in the world, but it just has a rogue dev that gets pissed off or something happens, and because they're enabled to do it, they take. That's what happened with Floki the first time. It's you can't avoid it. You can't get away from it. Renouncing ownership isn't the right answer because as we learned with Paratoken, you renounce the ownership and then it turns out you're subject to this attack and you can't do anything with the code because you renounced it. The best answer is to simply educate ourselves on getting more critical about tokens that lack these fundamental things that I think tell us that they're worth the time. A solid, strong website, embracing all forms of social media, not just the Telescam group, not forcing people to go to Telescam. In a perfect world, Telescam is the last place you would go to get critical information. Your website should be the first. Actively communicating with the community, actively doing AMAs, not with the shillers and not with the most popular people, but with everybody. Like, why wouldn't you do that? That you're actually doing press releases, that you're actually doing something in your community, let's say, that can be proven. If you say you're doing charities, that we can see that you're interacting with the charity and the charity responds and says thank you, that we're holding them accountable to actually show up and show and prove. That's what I think is missing, because too many people are FOMOing in based on the green candle. Because they know that people FOMO out the green candle, it creates a temptation and they're exploiting that, which is what created so many variations of a rug pull. Because if we got back to the core fundamentals, and even now, like creating an LLC used to be that we would look at that and say, okay, these guys are serious. And actually it's a detriment because the ones that have created LLC, I'm not counting SafeMoon, but like Saitama, Terrarium, they're the biggest screw ups in the business right now. So the LLC didn't really help them. And in fact, Terrarium might be on the verge of getting sued because they did form an LLC and that has certain obligations. So it's not even about forming a business. It's not about renounced ownership. It's about taking and looking and criticizing and holding them accountable and making sure they want the smoke and come on neutral platforms and take hard questions. Don't take softballs. Take hard questions. Be open to your community. When they tell you we're not happy and we need to make some changes, you actually make those changes. You don't just run from criticism. Like many in the Saitama Wolf Pack, there was a commenter in the Saitama Wolf Pack, and unfortunately he went private because he was getting attacked by the Wolf Pack. And if you heard me, I said that they like to bite themselves. But ultimately, like this guy, he was perfect. He said, no, we should be accepting criticism. Why are we running from criticism? That's how we get better. That's the key. We have to have tokens that want criticism. We have to have tokens that want the feedback. We want to have criticism welcomed by the token that they say, no, this is what it is. This is what we need. This is what we should do. This is how we get better, so that some of these other variants that I talked about become less of a concern. Like this business of an internal, collusion with somebody external. It's still possible, but it's less of a risk because they do things like they went after Certic from day one. And Certic saw there's no extra wallets. And Certic saw that all wallet traffic and transits are well documented. And we see on their website, they have a list of every single traffic transit with a link to the transaction is straight on their website in full transparency. So we know where the money flow is going. That's what Libero does. But some of these other projects, they don't do anything like that. And yet they're the ones that get the traffic. And that's what causes the rug pulls. That's what makes it worse. The only way we can improve that is to hold them accountable. And they have to do what they say they're going to do. And I'm not talking green candle. I'm talking avoid garbage like I saw with Terrarium initially. Talking about it's not an investment. Right there, it should have been sketchy to everybody because they're telling you in advance, at some point, we might just rip you off or cause you to lose money, not maliciously. And that's what happened. That's essentially a rug pull. If we're being honest, going back to my definition, essentially Terrarium did a soft rug pull, not malicious. I don't think it's malicious. I don't think it was intentional. I don't think they wanted to cause that problem. I think they're incompetent, but incompetence can also trigger rug pulls because it took value out of the project. It took money away from the investors. That's what happened because this idiot posts what appears to be a fabricated email and causes all sorts of chaos because Binance US says it's not a thing. That's another form of rug pull. They all are the same type thing. And I think once we embrace what I just said as the truth around rug pulls, that there's so many variations, but at the simple core, if somebody does something that causes the value to be removed and that causes us not to be able to do a thing, that's essentially a rug pull, and we should hold those tokens accountable.